Good afternoon and welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Alli Joseph and my guest today is filmmaker and children's book author John Chester, who with his food writer and chef wife Molly traded Los Angeles city life to start their own farm on a 200-acre stretch of desiccated soil, and we see that in the film, outside of Los Angeles. Inspired in part by their rescue dog Todd at the time, the Chesters worked for over 8 years to chronicle the difficult yet rewarding process of creating their now famous diversified farming mecca, Apricot Lane Farms, just in case anybody didn't hear that, Apricot Lane Farms. The result on screen was Biggest Little Farm, I'll say that again, Biggest Little Farm, a new documentary that premiered at the Toronto Film Festival last year and is now, as of May 10th, it will be in theaters. Welcome, John.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. I got through that. I'm sure I was going to make it.
You did really well.
Thank you.
You did great.
Thank you so much. I like when I get praised.
There's a future.
Thank you. It's good to know. So this film, I watched it last night. It's beautiful. We were talking a little bit before you came on live about the intricacies of the photography and how people who really appreciate beautiful photography will cleave to this, but we'll talk about that a little later. Your dog Todd was a large part of the inspiration for this film, and for your move with your wife from city dwellers to full-on farmers, right? So tell us a little bit this is like a pithy way about Todd and the farm and how that came to be.
So Todd was a rescue dog, and he came into our life. I managed to get him from a hoarder who was about to lose all of her animals. And I was doing actually a documentary series about her for Animal Planet at the time, and we convinced her to give us this dog, but I made this promise to the dog that, you know, our home would be his last. But he started barking his head off, and we were essentially kind of evicted from our apartment, given a choice. And we had always been talking about farming, and we seemed that we found the courage in protecting our promise to the dog to make this huge leap into farming, something we'd both talked about. But not just any farming. It was we were going to start this regenerative farm and grow all these things and do it in harmony with nature. It was incredibly idealistic at the time. We didn't know how idealistic that was. But that's how Todd got us farming.
Now, we do see that, you know, as we go along in the film, that there was this dedication to crop diversity, which is not like a lot of farming now, and sustainable farming without pesticides and other modern farming processes. What created this dream, though, in you and your wife to have the farm be this way, in fact?
Well, a number of things, but Molly was a traditional food chef at the time, and she really specialized in understanding the importance of not only sourcing food that was, had been maximizing its nutrient density in the way that it was grown, but how to prepare that food to maximize the absorption, to really sort of infuse and create that healthy gut microbiome that affects everything from obviously our physical health to even our mental health. And so the more we got into that world, me through her in a way, we became increasingly aware of how important the soil was on the farm and how it was managed and how the food was grown. And we noticed that no one was really farming in this way. There weren't these regenerative principles. There was organic, but it doesn't really require soil to be this incredibly diverse system of microorganisms that ultimately inform the health of the plant, which goes into the food that we eat. And we saw an opportunity, and it really came through Molly's cooking and knowledge of food. And then there was the whole, I'd always loved, I grew up on a farm when I was really young, but it was a sort of industrialized, conventional farm in my 20s for a short period of time, and knew nothing about soil. Loved the farm life, but didn't understand the work that it was going to take to rebuild this land that we had purchased.
So there is a backstory here with you and farming, because, you know, I have to just jump forward a little bit here. We see you, you know, at the beginning, you guys are newbies, and then as we go along, he's birthing calves, and, you know, pulling it out of the cow.
But none of that was from my past.
Right, you know, and, you know, sort of, I mean, and granted, the film unfolds over 8 years for people who are watching and are curious to know how long does it take to really truly chronicle desiccated soil that has no irrigation system, it has no water, it has no life, really, into this, you know, lush, beautiful place that you guys have created. So you did have some germ.
I knew how to build fences. I knew how to run tractors and work weed whackers and I knew how to exist on a farm, but I didn't understand the complexity that would be required in order for a farm to run like a self-contained ecosystem. I mean, what we ended up landing on was a farm that had been extractively farmed for 45, 50 years in order to grow food in the cheapest way possible. Cheap food is grown on the back of soil that becomes depleted. The ideas that we or the idea that we wanted to start with was to regenerate that soil to create this flywheel effect, where you're actually using the soil and feeding the soil at the same time. And none of that was knowledge that I had prior, but I love the idea of farming in harmony with nature, but it was, based more on our understanding of the way the gut microbiome worked.
Right. So, and I would say you guys took this in an empirical fashion.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you had to learn by doing, and we really see
Yeah.
the joy in the film as you and your wife and a lot of the good folks who came and volunteered apparently to help you on this farm. A lot of young people came out
Through
in
the
the
Wolf
building.
Organization, which is a nonprofit sort of way to sort of connect with farms that farm in this way.
And all these great young people came out and worked with you, but you guys had to try and fail to fix all of the problems that nature provides to get everything in balance. So is regenerative farming, is that a term that people should know?
It is, because I think a lot of people use this word sustainable, but there's no accreditation for that. There's no, it's like when we used to eat those things called Nature Valley all natural granola bars. And we realized that there wasn't actually a certification for that word. They could just use it. Sustainable has been sort of thrown around and overused. And regenerative, it could start to happen with that word as well. But regenerative at least puts the right mindset on, the right lens to look at you're farming in a way that regenerates the land. Because like I said, organics does not require that method, right? You can't use synthetically derived pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers. It doesn't make any requirement for how you treat the soil. But everything passes through the soil, right? And so we just knew the importance of that method for us, but we didn't realize how depleted the land was that we purchased.
And we do see that in the very beginning of the film as your wife picks up what looks like a rock, but is in fact a piece of soil that she can throw to the ground, and it just doesn't even doesn't fall apart, anything like that. But what's interesting, you make an interesting point. You talk about the gut microbiome and the way that a farm functions in its best capacity when everything is working in harmony. So it's almost as though the earth is a metaphor for the gut.
Absolutely, and the farm is a microcosm of the planet's ecosystem. And the whole entire thing is about, like if you look at the planet and you think of it as a self-regulating ecosystem, that is the planet's immune system. You need to reestablish the same thing on your farm to help prevent epidemics of pests and disease from running out of control. But when you handcuff or put nature in a straitjacket and you create such collateral damage that the other elements around that normally would balance things out are also obliterated. And so you have to accept some of the good and the bad, but you have to encourage the resurgence of biodiversity, which is the basis for a healthy ecosystem and essentially a healthy immune system.
And it's amazing how you get there, right? I mean, it's
but it's Pandora's box. That's the problem, is that the idealism gets checked when all of a sudden the coyotes are eating 350 of your chickens, and
gophers,
you have a snail population that's destroying your citrus, and the gophers are. We had the worst gopher problem in Ventura County that we created by growing cover crop. And there's other benefits, obviously, massive benefits to growing cover crop, but everything leads to something else. But you have to be able to look even beyond that and start to see where this collaboration can take place. And it really comes from wildlife and predatory species of insects.
And in fact, in the film, we see some of the solutions that you guys evolved to some of the natural problems, whether you created them or not.
Right.
I didn't know that ducks would eat snails. Is that a thing? Do they
That's
routinely
a thing.
eat?
Yeah.
Obviously.
That's it. We have to use livestock, wildlife, and plants to solve our agricultural problems. We can't become reliant on the thing that has that collateral damage effect to it. And every one problem requires about 3, at least, triangulating solutions. And because, as in the ecosystem, not one solution to a problem is ever strong enough alone. It's compounded, I like it to think of it as it's like we farm in a way where we have 30 Nerf bats to prevent the intruder from coming in. One Nerf bat wouldn't do it, but 30 of them might deter them. You know,
Right.
so we have these blunt objects to work with in nature. But I love the complexity in figuring out that puzzle. I thought giving up filmmaking would not satisfy, you know, the creative part of my brain, but I use it on overdrive now. It's like a 4D model constantly circulating in your head about how to attack these things.
I'm exhausted being on the outside of your brain. It's fascinating what must
I
be
hope that's
going
not-
on in there. No, it's a great thing. I mean, you know, because what you've established just in the last 3 or 4 minutes is that farming is really hard. And I don't think anybody would question that. Now, filmmaking, as we both know, is also really hard. And marriage, too, can also at times be really hard. And
Yes.
so in the making of this film, you've managed to balance all of these things, and sometime in the process during the film, we see you also had a child. So how did you and Molly balance all of these, well, maybe it is triangulated things, and make it all work?
It's funny, yeah, the farm that we built is called a vertically integrated farm. And the life that we built became very vertically integrated. I don't know that it's a healthy thing to do what we did with this farm, growing 250 different things, and try to make a film about it at the same time, which was not my original plan. But I mean, in full disclosure, I think I grew up in a pretty chaotic family, and I think in chaos I get calm, but that's not healthy for everyone else around me because the chaos still exists. Mm-hmm. And as I get into my 40s, I'm learning that may be a skill, but it also has, you know, compromising elements to people around me. But I loved it. I loved doing all of it at once.
You could tell.
Yeah, and my wife was on board for it too, but she probably wouldn't have pushed it as fast as I did. You know, I wanted it all to happen now. I wanted the cows, I wanted the sheep, I wanted the pigs. It's just crazy.
But she wanted, I thought, 75 varieties of fruit trees. That was her thing.
Her thing was just to be able to grow everything she could ever possibly want to cook with. And she did it.
Which is so lovely.
And she did it.
So she says it must make these the most amazing meals.
We have absolutely, we have amazing meals, and it's a really great life. It's really difficult, but it's really wonderful.
Wow. So, as you've described, harnessing nature, trying to find the balance is incredibly complex, and there's also something sublime about it, you know, and we really see that beauty in the filmmaking, especially for folks who really love photography and the art of it. So much shot work here. I have to imagine you had a lot of helping hands and a team of many to cover these 200 acres of farmland.
No, not a lot. It started with for the first 5 years, like I said, I didn't want to make the film. I didn't know what the film was even would have been about, and we didn't know enough about farming to tell a story about farming. It really was going to be based on whether or not this would work, like this way of farming. And it wasn't until year 5 that I realized that it was working. But along the way, I had some interns who became incredibly competent shooters, who also, one of them had gone to film school, but they were also doing farm work. And I shot a lot of it myself, but at the same time, when there were moments that needed, where I was in the scene, they would capture it. And they would spend months on things too sometimes, like shooting, you know, ladybugs laying eggs. And at year 5, we started to beef the team out, and I brought in some more, you know, sort of more experienced cinematographers to work with us to capture these very nuanced things that we were seeing recur every year. But we didn't know what the story was until year 5, because year 5 was when everything kind of returned. We started seeing, you know, gopher snakes and weasels and badgers and hawks and barn owls, and these things were helping to balance out all these other issues that we were having on the farm.
Well, and we see that in the film, amazingly, that you were able to capture the gopher snakes going in the hole.
Yeah.
I mean, just
That
hours and
took time.
hours of the editor. Oh, your editor must
She's
have
amazing. Her
just-
name's Amy Overbeck. She's fantastic, and it was a 1.5 year editing process. It was 90 terabytes
Wow.
of footage.
I'm not surprised.
That translates to a lot.
Tell the people who don't know what that means. It's
90
a lot.
I mean, it was the cameras started and stopped 860,000 times.
Wow.
I don't know how many minutes or hours or days or weeks or months, but
You get lost. How could you?
Yeah.
You can't imagine if
Amy's
you're taking
Amy's
notes.
fast.
She's, imagine so. I've been remiss in reintroducing John Chester, the director, filmmaker, director, and now new children's book author of Biggest Little Farm is the film, and that is coming out May 10th in select theaters, and then after that nationwide. So we're almost about to see it in theaters. And we're talking about the documentary that he made over 8 years, as he was describing, about Apricot Lane Farm, which he and his wife Molly built after leaving a life in Los Angeles for something more real, perhaps, and certainly
Reconnected.
Absolutely. Now tell us about, since I mentioned the children's book, this is lovely. You have a young son who we
Throw
see
that onto
get
the mix,
born.
onto
In
the top of everything
well,
else.
we get to see born in the film, or almost actually born.
Yeah.
Much right after, I think we see you birthing a cow, so you can
Yeah.
see that you are all hands-on
Yeah.
in every capacity. What made you want to write a kid's book other than perhaps having a son?
Well, I'd started making these stories about the animals on the farm, like these short stories, and around the same time that I was making the film, I got approached by Macmillan, a division called Fywell and Friends. Gene Fywell, an amazing publisher, saw the shorts, and they offered to let me do a series of books about the animals that I had made short films about, who also appear in the feature film. So the stories were kind of already written, but then I had to sort of adapt what I knew about my craft as a filmmaker to an illustrated children's book. But it's really great because when kids come to the farm, the first thing they want to see is Emma the pig, or the orphan lamb, and Maggie the cow. And so for years, parents had seen these shorts and were always telling me I should turn them into a children's book. But it all kind of happened at once, and it's amazing to have that come out at the same time as the film.
And it's soon, right?
Yeah, it'll be out the books come out around the same time as you can pre-order now on like Amazon, etc.
And who did
Barnes
the
and Noble.
illustrations for you?
Jennifer Meyer.
I saw a little preview on Macmillan's website.
Yeah, she's amazing,
really
an amazing illustrator.
I watched some of this with my 7-year-old son last night. I let him stay up too late.
How'd that go?
Finally, he and his sister were watching Planet Earth, the new Attenborough series, right, recently, and sobbing because, as in nature, as in your farm, many animals perish for various reasons. Some are human created, some are just the ecosystem. Yeah. And yet he watched this with a sort of a fresh eye. I thought he would be very sad, and at some of the things that you've shown. He was very matter of fact about it, but he explained to me that in everything to be in balance, some things have to go and bring up. So I think, do you find that this is appropriate for young children? Will it hold their interest? Do you think that there are lessons here for them?
Absolutely, and especially age 7 and up. We've found. We've been testing it and showing this film at festivals for 8 months, and age 7 and up. And I really made it, for a lens. There's a window for them, And to your point about the lens, I think I really wanted to make sure that we gave children the opportunity to see that there's endless possibility to collaborate with a complex ecosystem, because no one's ever really taught us that. Those stories aren't around. And humans are a very powerful force in nature. We are part of that. But we have not had a consciousness for our power. And I think as we raise generations to be more aware and more conscious of this, right, there's that opportunity for collaboration that we didn't even look at or think was possible. And that's what I think the film exemplifies. And it's honest about it, right, because it doesn't make it look easy, but it shows within that complexity, there are as many opportunities to coexist.
Absolutely. And that's just the young people. What do you find from your screenings or any focus grouping testing? What's the biggest takeaway you hope viewers have from Biggest Little Farm, either about farming or empathy or perseverance, perhaps? Well,
I think we've become a culture of confrontators. We see something we don't like, we read about something we don't like, and we get into this attack confrontational mode. And I think there's value to that, There's value in marching against Monsanto, but then you're confronting large-scale agriculture, you're confronting the things you don't like, but what we've lost is fostering a culture of innovators. We're not going to get around the needs for a Monsanto or the needs for industrialized agriculture if we're not encouraging people to innovate and fail, because we've lost touch for 75, 100 years for ways to farm in this way, to make it possible so that we don't need to be reliant on those things. But ultimately, the consumer has the ability to vote and choose to support the farms that grow food in a regenerative way. And that will change agriculture, and that will change the need that is provided through our complacency by chemical companies. And we're a very powerful force in nature, and that's what I was saying earlier. And I hope that older viewers will be able to take away that and feel educated about what's really happening in soil.
And in fact, that we have a choice, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
that's a huge driving force here. And here at Salon, we have interviewed directors like yourself and filmmakers about similar films in the sense that they are about different and return to traditional farming.
Yes.
And I think our viewers in particular are typically progressive and very engaged in this kind of thinking.
Know your farmer.
So,
I mean, it really it really goes a long way to changing culture.
Absolutely. One other thing, so I know you guys were fortunate and went to Sundance, which is amazing, and Biggest Little Farm was the runner-up for the Festival Favorite Award. What do you think, you told me what you think people take away from this, or what you hope, but what do you think resonates most with the average viewer?
It's a great question, and I think what I knew I didn't want to make was a film that had been made so many times before, and that was one that shows us all the reasons to be afraid and scared about the insurmountable challenges that face us environmentally. And I see it so much differently in that we have this power, and I wanted to offer a different way, a different view that I experienced, and that was that I fell in love with this idea. I fell in love with nature, and then when I fell in love with it, I began to see endless possibilities for its ability to be resilient. And you can't affect great change unless you help people change the way they see. And if you can show them and give them the opportunities to fall in love, you can have the most profound influence. Just like you're loving your children, and when they drive your car through the garage door, you know that that child is capable of more than just that one act. But when nature does something like that to us, we lock it up.
Beautifully said. John Chester, excellent mind and empathic human, and now amazing farmer and filmmaker. His film, Biggest Little Farm, comes out in theaters nationwide soon, starting May 10th in select theaters in New York, Los Angeles, and